Hello, everybody, and you are very welcome to Successful Perspectives. Successful Perspectives, of course, is when we deep dive into the topic of leadership with one of our members from our very influential and selective network, Boardroom by EMIR. And for this conversation, I'm delighted to be joined by Mark Ackerman, who is the Vice President for Middle East and Africa at ServiceNow. Mark, always great to see you, and welcome to Successful Perspectives.
Good morning, Trevor. Thank you very much.
So I've had the pleasure of getting to know you a little bit in recent times, where here's an opportunity for me to kind of dig a little bit deeper, and specifically around our topic of leadership. So let's get a little time machine and go back in time a little bit and imagine when you were younger. Yeah. And what I'd like to ask you is, if you reach back into your memory, do you remember there being a time when there was someone that you looked up to as a kind of leader that was inspirational, or maybe one day you would like to be like that person?
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. Definitely there was, starting out my career in technology, one of my very first CEOs around 25 years ago was a guy by the name of Ed Gassner. And at the time in South Africa, he was an exceptionally charismatic leader, someone that was responsible for building one of the largest ICT companies in South Africa. And really what I witnessed at the time was him building a young, strong and diverse team around himself. And he was very inspirational to all. He was probably in his 30s at the time, so relatively young from that perspective. And what I really learned from him was building a company to be the best. But also, more importantly, what I learned from him as well was there was also a time to be serious and to have fun, and then really building a strong culture. So I recall fondly those days of really being successful, being in one of the fastest growing companies, but at the same time recalling having some fun and having an open environment, and that was largely down to Ed's leadership.
What did Ed go on to do, out of curiosity? If he was in his 30s, where did you follow his career in any way?
Yeah, funnily enough, we still keep in contact and have some business even to this day. And as my role with ServiceNow, we've had some discussions and work that's taking place in one of the businesses he's leading out of Cape Town in South Africa. So still we're good in touch, which is always nice.
Well, that is remarkable, and it's a great insight and example for anybody. A lot of people who watch this on social, on LinkedIn, what we've noticed is a lot of them are younger, starting out in their careers, and there's a perfect example of understanding the power of network, yeah, but also just the power of relationship. Right, all of those years. Now, obviously, you're a really young man, so it's not that long ago. But you take my point. Like the arc of a relationship can be very, very long, and it's important to kind of nurture those relationships. Again, kind of thinking back to those times that you started out with Ed, right? Can you recall looking back at certain ideas or misconceptions or ideas you had about leadership, but then now with the benefit of some wisdom and experience, you've realized that actually that was absolute nonsense?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, one of the things, even, young in my career, and I think a lot of the time that we perceive today, is that leadership will always have all the answers, they'll always be infallible. And I think that suggests that leaders should always possess the superior knowledge and never make a mistake or show vulnerability. But I think the notion is far from reality, and actually can be detrimental to proper leadership. So I think, what I've learned over the years as well is, radical transparency, having that vulnerability is really signs of a strong leader. And also important to make sure that there's a strong leadership team around yourself, that you can lean on other people's skills and strengths. When you're not having all the answers, and you are vulnerable.
I love that, and it's something Ray Dalio talked quite a bit about, and something that when I read somebody somebody that accomplished, somebody I respect, probably the only person in that world putting information and content out that I've read his books, I pay attention to what he says. Otherwise, everyone else, broadly speaking, hasn't resonated much. But he talked quite a bit about this idea of, real leadership is not having all the answers all the time. And in actual fact, being very transparent about that with your team. And because it creates an environment, one, where other people can come up with the answers, but also just to show everybody that you're kind of in this together, trying to figure out what the best way forward actually is, Yeah. I think that's a really powerful idea. So you sit at the top of an organization covering Middle East and Africa, and you've a lot of people in the region. Do you feel that it can be lonely sitting at the top of an organization overseeing a region? Is there anyone you go to for advice, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we've had quite a unique journey where we started out with a very small business, and today, quite a large size business. And I think often, the title and the role can be very intimidating, particularly to new people joining. And it does limit people reaching out, So as you progress your career, the number of peers also diminish as you ascend into the various leadership roles. So leading to, I guess, in some instances, less confidence. And then, of course, you've always got the power dynamics also play an important role, which I believe needs to be overcome, to create this balanced and healthy culture. So, one of the things I try and do to kind of make sure that it doesn't become too lonely is to verbalize to the team a lot around the importance of every single role within an organization. A manager role doesn't necessarily entitle you to be more important than anybody else. And one of the things I'm trying to do as well is also to make sure that kind of you walk the talk, and really, I'll use one of those corporate words, but kind of skip level meetings. Really going down beyond just leading with only the core leadership team, but actually going further across the organization, and really listening to everybody and getting a perspective from everyone. I think that's, for me, one of the key things. It's kind of almost having a lot of confidence at different levels. Obviously, you can't disclose everything to everybody. You've got to have some leadership discretion, but taking the feedback, the candid feedback from many people and allowing them to get the sense that you're approachable, I think is something I try and work on as part of the culture.
And I suppose that's also helpful then, particularly as you get deeper into the organization and try as much as is humanly possible. There has to be a balance, I'm sure, but it helps you to try and identify future leaders as well. How do you go about doing that, or how do you think about that in a kind of from a strategic perspective?
I think obviously it starts with talking and consulting with many people, but as you get to know the team and all that, I think it's the first place always is finding talent is looking at the results. People that are delivering consistent results even when the times are tough, people that aren't looking for excuses but actually delivering strong performance on a regular basis. But I think also individuals who demonstrate selfless action, people who are adaptable and proactive, willing to take on responsibility, irrespective of, their title or rank or role within the organization, and I think, that coupled then with people that are, you spot them, that are managing relationships, both up and down within the organization, the ones that are demonstrating that kind of emotional intelligence. These are kind of the traits that we're looking at. And I say very often you'll find those gems pretty early on and then start cultivating them and mentoring them to be leaders in the future.
Okay, wonderful. One last question, Mark, before we kind of shift lanes and have a little bit of fun with our rapid fire round. It's more of a philosophical question, so a big one to think about. So we hear a lot today, and rightly so, I would add, around the drive for a search for purpose, particularly from a leadership point of view. How do you find your purpose, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a $1 million question, I think, for almost everybody, right? And it's not just a corporate question, but I think naturally it starts with the passions and interests. But I don't believe this, that you finding your purpose is a once-off exercise. It's something that evolves based on your environment, time, and circumstance in your life. I think the most important thing for me around the purpose as well is not having complacency. A gratitude and no complacency is probably the key tenets for the, finding and maintaining the purpose, but also enjoy naturally problem solving. So I try to make sure I balance these things with the impact I'm making on the organization and testing that on a regular basis. I think on a more personal note, I do look to seek for meaningful connections with like-minded individuals, both within and outside of the organization, able to provide me with some insights, some inspiration and guidance. And then, I've also kind of created this personal board of directors, which is, different elements of the life, both on a personal, family, health, corporate perspective, on leadership skills, and really kind of created, I've cultivated Twitter, I guess, to a large extent to give me these feeds. We spoke about Ray Dalio earlier. Getting his principles pushed down to you on a daily basis reminds you of some of the, the key principles and purpose that you should keep. And just relating to these people, I think, is important. And then I think finally, family and sport for me really help keep me balanced.
The South African that's into sport, that's a surprise there.
Yes.
You guys tend to excel there. Okay, wonderful. And I love that idea of your personal board. I really like that. Mark, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure to have you on Successful Perspectives, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Trevor. I really appreciate the opportunity.